This is episode 2 of Youthful Perspectives. I'm your host, Mason Beerbaum. Today's guest is retired teacher and former Albany Head Football Coach, Mike Kleinschmidt. Throughout our discussion, Coach Kleinschmidt and I explored numerous subjects, like his formative upbringing, the similarities he observed in leading a classroom and a team, understanding both what to do and what not to do as a leader, and the importance of passion and sincerity, and the vital role it plays in leadership. For those who were fortunate enough to call him a teacher or a coach, one of the most memorable aspects of him was his genuine love for what he did, and the pride you could hear in his voice and see on his face. This energy he brought with him can be best described as contagious, and was felt from the captains of the team to the managers on the sidelines, and everyone in between. I hope this conversation was able to capture a sliver of his contagious energy, and I am delighted to share it with you all. And now, Coach Kleinschmidt. All right, well, thank you, Coach Kleinschmidt, for joining me today. We'll start off with the first question right here. What values did you witness and develop in your small hometown of Sauk Center?
I think family was a big one. They really valued education, and that was prophetic, but that was good. Religion was a really powerful, so I think back, force in our formative years. And just maybe a good hard work ethic. Those are things that pop in my head. You know, probably universal everywhere, but they were good guiding lights for me.
Mm-hmm. And I would assume that you're probably surrounded by, you know, the concept of community and family and religion. That's kind of all woven together in this small town. It seems like that's a very popular thing that kind of is a cornerstone to a lot of communities, especially, you know, back in the day. Especially religion, I feel like that was just every Sunday before
Every
Vikings
Sunday.
are on. You're going to church, and then you go home and you can do the rest of your day. But that was
It was kind of the center of the being of everything you did, and it kind of watersheded out to your family and all your ethics and I think all the staples that my parents wanted us to learn. It kind of emanated out from religion. So, But that was very good. I'm very happy for that.
Well, that's good. And then remind me, how many siblings did you have growing up then?
There were 7 kids total.
Okay.
It was a big Catholic family.
Mm-hmm. And were you in the middle, youngest, oldest?
Number 6 out of 7.
Okay.
And really a wide range. My sister graduated and went off to college before I entered the first grade. So that's what you had in those days with the big German Catholic families.
Absolutely. I mean, I can relate to that myself a little bit too.
You can.
I got an older brother who's, 10 years older than me. My sister's 13 years younger than him, but at the end of the day, we're still family. You know?
Yes, that's a great. Yes.
They're able to kind of take the heat off the younger kids too by getting in trouble first. So the parents don't have to ream down on the younger kids as much. So I appreciate that a lot too.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah. But I'm sure you weren't getting in too much trouble back in the day.
There were times.
There were times. Just classic high schooler. I can relate. Well, the next one I have here is, did you have part-time jobs growing up? And if so, what were they and what lessons did you learn from them?
I did. My first job was a paper boy. We had the Kleinschmidt family. We had the biggest paper out in town. And it was my 2 older brothers. Then it got passed down to my next oldest brother and me, passed down to me and my younger brother. And that was a big thing for me because I learned in those days you had to deliver the paper every day. So I learned responsibility. At 3 o'clock, had to deliver the Minneapolis Star. Every day at 3 o'clock, drop what you were doing. Every Sunday morning at 6 a.m., we had to create the papers. They came in different sections. We had to bundle them and deliver them. And then every 2 weeks, we had to go and collect, had to knock on every door. So it taught me interpersonal skills at an unbelievable young age. So that was a big impact on me. And it also, as I think back now, it gave me financial independence because we got to keep the profit. Mm-hmm. Never had to ask our parents for those little book orders in elementary. Never had to ask for money. Buy Christmas presents. Never had to ask for money. So that was my first one. I had a job with a bait dealer in Sauk Center, and I learned a lot from that. Day one, I walked in, I think right at 8. I was not late. Mm-hmm. And my boss looked at me with that cigarette, and he said, I want you here at 10 to 8. If I say 8, I want you here at 10 to 8. And that spilled over into the rest of my life. He was a tough boss, but you had to earn your stripes, and when you did, he treated you with respect.
Mm-hmm.
So those were the main jobs that I had growing up, and I dabbled a little bit in baling hay for a farmer outside of town, and that was brutal work. So in there you learn the blue collar side of life completely.
Absolutely. I know for me personally, just growing up around this farming area, I've only picked rocks once in my life or done any sort of like farm work, but oh my gosh, that is the greatest full body workout I have ever experienced in my life. And I bet baling hay is the same way. And you're could be middle of July, 90 degrees, 60% humidity. You're sweating out there, but you got to get the job done, especially those dairy farmers too. They wake up sick, doesn't matter. You still got to go out, milk the cows. So
you learned a respect for that line of work.
Mm-hmm.
Always had that and always will.
Really unsung heroes
they are
of just the world in general. I mean, agriculture is just a huge thing, but that's interesting though with the paper route that you had to deliver that. I didn't know it was a family business of yours, but did you start how old were you roughly?
I would say right around grade 5, that ballpark, all the way up to maybe grade 4 up to about grade 8. Then when you get to the 8th grade, you're just too old for it.
Mm-hmm.
8th, 9th, sports, school, and everything gets in the way. And then so eventually my younger brother took it over, and then it went off to somebody else.
Would you say of those 3 jobs, though, the bait store was the one where you'd say lessons for life that you later served? I'm not saying the other ones didn't provide lessons, but it was more formative.
Yes. You had to be on time. You're just you kind of went through a pecking order when we first hired you, and then you got more and more responsibility as each summer came by. And I will add, it was an extremely physical job because 3 times a week we put out a 1,200-foot seining net, and with hip waders on. You had hip waders on all day, every day. They were just like your regular gear. We would pull both sides of the net in, and it was go to one side, go to the other, go one, go to the other. And then when you got the net up to shore, you had to sit on the shore, and in unison, 3 of you had to pull on the bottom line and go to the other side and back to this side. It was about a 2.5-hour adventure every 3 times a week, seining minnows. So it was a great physical workout.
Absolutely. That had to transfer over to sports really well too.
Had to.
Indirectly.
It did. And you had to work together. When the 3 of you were on the line pulling, you had to go in perfect unison, almost like rowing, like oaring.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a good example right there. Absolutely. The next one I got here is you kind of alluded to this already a little bit with the bait shop owner, but were you surrounded by leaders growing up? If so, who were some of the leaders you were surrounded by, and what do they teach you both directly and indirectly?
Like anyone, my parents were probably the first leaders that I witnessed. I learned a lot, probably a lot, maybe the most from them. My dad had, he got early onset Parkinson's disease, basically when I was just maybe 1 year old. But I watched him. He was a big man in town. He was president of the bank. He was a school board, you name it. He was on every Lions, all that. And when that hit, he had to drop out of all that and basically go to an early retirement. But the lesson I learned is he just kept his dignity, looked at it courageously. I've never once heard him complain. So I watched that. As a kid, you watch that. And that taught me a lot. And off mic, you and I were saying how you start each day with a thankful note. And to this day, I've done that because I just look at my father for that. And my mom, she had to not only take care of 7 kids, but also her husband who had a debilitating disease. So, and she was always chipper. So I learned a lot from them. And I also had coaches along the way that were very formative. And, when you look at leadership, it's almost like, I want to say there's a line, Mason. I don't know it exactly. You probably do. Death by 1,000 cuts or something.
Oh, yeah, paper cuts sort of.
Yes. Yeah. To me, leadership, when I think back about it, it's by 1,000 little things that come across.
Mm-hmm.
Not one person that just stands there and you march and follow them, but it was like you pick it up from people along the way, and then you form it into your own.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it right there. I've never really thought of it that way, but whether it was the jobs as a young kid or seeing your father keep his dignity. That's a great word to describe that. It seems like in a terrible situation. I mean, that had to really hurt his pride, and to have to step down from things that he really cared about and never complained anything about that. Put a brave face on for all the kids in your family. I mean, that's a very noble act for him.
Yes, and that's where I get the, where you find courage, you find leadership in. The superintendent came down one day to me, Mr. Foster, and he asked, we had a student in our school, maybe about a high school sophomore or ninth grade, that had muscular dystrophy, and he needed somebody to work with him every day, 7th hour. And I had study hall, and he knew that my dad was physically handicapped, and I said I'd do it. And so I started working with him. His name is Bobby, and he just faced things so positive, and we'd go into the weight room and do a workout, and I got to know him, and I thought, this kid is amazing. He's amazing because they faced this, and with such courage. That taught me a good lesson too. And a little side note, because I know you're University of Minnesota, he was a huge Minnesota Gopher fan, and I remember giving him a hat. Later on, his sister Ruby got a hold of me, and he was kind of near in the end, so I brought him a Gophers hat, and he loved that. Nice, sharp Gophers hat. And in fact, I think at his funeral, they had that sitting on the casket.
That's really
cool.
Cool.
He was a short chapter in my life, but a big one.
Absolutely. It's a quality of time over quantity of time, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really just like you said, formative at a young age to be able to deal with something like that. And the fact that someone, whether it was dealing with a physical handicap like your father or Bobby was, or people that are in broken houses. I know, talking to a couple of people that came back from their Africa trip, I don't know if you heard about this, but there's some Albany students that went to Africa for 2 weeks to teach basketball clinic down in southern Africa, and they come back, and I was talking to them, and they said those kids are the most happy kids I've ever seen with such little in their lives. Some of them don't even have electricity or clean water, but they still will wake up, good morning, how are you doing? And it's a genuine, in America it seems like, people, good morning, how you doing? Good. It's transactional. It's just kind of mundane, happens here and there. It's just how it goes, but they really appreciate it. They really, it's genuine. And when you have little, you're able to appreciate a lot more, it seems like, too, or you appreciate the little things a lot more.
That's a great example. That just gives me chills. That's how fortunate realize how fortunate you are every day. I remember going to 9:30 Mass at St. Paul's Church. That was we'd go. And with Parkinson's, my dad had, if you know anything about Parkinson's, they shake. And I remember watching kids making fun of my dad in 2 pews over and 2 pews back. And I thought, I'm never going to treat someone who has a disability that way. Never. Plus I wanted to just punch him in the face.
Yeah. Understandably. Yeah, that would be very, again, formative, like you said, just to experience that, but a lesson in and of itself. The next question I have here, what sports did you play in high school? Which sports did you enjoy playing the most, and which sports were you best at, in your humble opinion?
I participated in football, hockey, and both baseball and track. So that's 4, but in those days you could kind of do that. And then at the very end, I kind of declared track as my main spring sport. But football, I just loved. I'll never forget 7th grade. We always got in trouble in elementary for tackling at recess, always.
So did we.
And I remember in 7th grade, I tackled a kid named Jordy. I tackled him hard, legal, and it was a big hit. And I remember my coach comes over and taps me on the shoulder and applauds me. And I thought, I love this. I just got patted on the shoulder for tackling somebody hard. I knew I was going to like the game. Oh, man. And I loved hockey. I grew up by a hockey rink, and hockey was just great. I still love it to this day, and love both baseball and track and field. And I learned a lot from all those sports. Football was the dominant one for me, though.
Yeah. What positions did you play in these sports?
And football, I was running back, linebacker, Hockey, I was a defenseman. They just take slap shots off your body. But I was known for big hits on the checks.
There you go.
Checking was the thing. And in track, I threw the shot put, discus, and I ran the high hurdles and the 4x1 meter relay.
Okay.
So it was pretty. I guess I look back, I was pretty diversified. I was a weightman, but also a sprinter.
There you go. That translates over to football very nicely
Yes.
then, as a running back and a linebacker.
Yes, it did.
So, is it true that you played college football then? Was it University of Morris?
University of Minnesota Morris.
Okay.
I wasn't. I was recruited because I had a good high school career, and was leaning towards St. John's or Northern State or Winona, but my brother-in-law became an assistant coach at Morris, and Morris had a great program back then. Just a great program, national playoffs, and it seemed like a good place to go. So I went there and never regretted it. Had a great experience playing college football.
Would you say being coached by a collegiate coach like you did at University of Morris, did you find some similarities in his leadership style compared to the coaches you had in your high school years?
Yeah, my high school coach was a great college player, even had a cup of coffee in the NFL with the Rams, so he was a great athlete. I will say, in talking about leadership lessons, one day in the locker room, I was about in ninth grade, end of ninth grade, and he came down there, and him and I were the only two in there, and he said, I was running with the wrong crowd. And my head coach put his finger in my chest up against the locker room, and he said, you better knock that off. He was just shaking, and that was a great lesson for me. And I'll always be thankful to my head coach and my high school coach, Tom Berdner, for that, because it turned me around, because I was running with the wrong crowd. In college, that coach was a little more, they had a huge winning streak when I got there. They were a confident, talented group. He was probably more on the positive side of things, I guess, but just a brilliant coach. He wasn't going to be there long, and sure enough, after my first year, he went on to a Division I AA school.
Oh, really?
So I was really fortunate to be able to play under a head coach like that for even 1 year. But the whole staff was good.
And then so you were there. He was there only for your first year, and the replacement that came in.
Yeah, in college, I had 3 head coaches in 4 years.
Oh, geez.
And I guess what I learned from that, Mason, is I hate to say it, but consistency is a big thing in coaching. And with 3 different head coaches, all of whom were fine, you have a change in everything. You have a change in your numbering system, changing this, changing that. Now, the defense stayed pretty consistent all along. Those coaches were great, but I played offense. So on our side of the ball, I had 3 changes in 4 years.
Yeah.
All good coaches, but I think that did have a little tough effect on us.
Yeah, that would be difficult. I know when I was playing for Albany, when you retired after, I think it was my junior year, we had Coach Ellingson come in, and the whole assignment's changed. And when we were there, we're like, oh my gosh, in our heads, we're like, we've been doing this in 7th grade. This is set in stone. Like, oh, this is gonna be so hard to change. And it was difficult, but we were able to do it. Didn't perfect it till maybe about halfway. Not perfect in quotation marks, till about halfway through the season. But if you learn that system and then the next year comes around and you got to change it all again, I mean, that like you said, consistency is key in leadership. And just like some people might think that's a small detail in a game of football, but that isn't small when you're, 4th quarter comes and you're trying to go a game-winning drive and you don't know if you're going to the left or the right.
That's good. That's a great point. I mean, even in my college experience, our defense was consistent all the years I was there. They were rock solid. And then my senior year, they kind of went back to those coaches, and it was we had a very good team again. So there's a lot to that. But I think Michael did a great job in the transition.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and he did a good job in walking and being understanding that we were changing his system, which helps a lot too. And I don't know if that was the case for your coaches, but just having a coach that kind of understands that you guys are changing and you're not trying to make mistakes, that certainly takes the pressure off. Like as a leader on that team that year, it took the pressure off me a little bit that he's allowing you to make mistakes as long as you're trying your hardest, not like to do your best.
Absolutely. Yep, sign of a good coach.
So the next one here is what motivated you to become a teacher and a coach?
I'll harken back to that Bobby Norton, the Bobby kid that I stretched, the kid that had MD. I thought about it then. because I got along good with him. But there was an older social studies teacher, and it was a summer. I was kind of floundering. I didn't know what to pursue. I was probably going to start my sophomore year in college. I was back in Sauk Center, and Mr. DuBois, and he said, you're good, Mike. You'd have a good impact on young kids, and you'd be a great coach, and I think it's something you really should look at. And I always respected him. It'd be someone just like your dad. I always respected him. He was a very good social studies teacher. Everybody in school liked him, and thought, I think I might do that. And I had 2 siblings that were teachers as well. So that path, and I'm glad I did it.
And those were the older siblings too, so you got to...
Yeah, we have a family of either you were a banker or a teacher for the most part.
There you go.
I did have a brother that was in charge of a furniture store for many years, but the rest were teachers and bankers.
Mm-hmm. So you just realized the positive impact that you had on Bobby, and then this authority figure kind of telling you that you could, really be special in that position.
I made the connection of how impactful a good teacher, a good coach can be when I was on the one end. And another thing I'll say, Mason, is you also learn, with leadership, you learn what not to do. It's kind of getting back to that leadership by 1,000 little things. I learned what not to do with some of my coaches. I won't say their names, but I thought, I'm never going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do that. And I think that's probably just as important as the positive ones that you put back in the cerebellum there.
Yeah. I never really thought of it that way, that over time, everyone always harps on the things you're supposed to do, this, that, and the other thing. But just as important, the things you should avoid.
Yes.
Whether it's, I guess there's times and place, but just like, for me, a big thing I observed in high school was like cussing out someone in front of people. Like, sure, sometimes certain situations call for that, if you need to make an example and if the person can take it. But if you're doing that short-tempered, in the moment because you're mad at yourself and you're taking out on someone else, like that's not good leadership. That doesn't help the situation. Rarely does that help the situation. Just one example.
Yes, that's a great point. And you just kind of lock that back in your brain. But you'll see in coaches, my high school defense coordinator, you see a passion. There's just a passion. College defensive coordinator, Coach Clark, they just had a passion for what they do. And then you see that and you think, okay, yeah, I see. You can just see it and feel it.
It's easier to buy into something when the person that is leading the whatever it is shows that they care.
Yes.
And makes you want to care too, just as much. It's a very contagious, maybe would be the word I would use to describe it.
Great word, Mason.
And that was one thing I always thought you guys were really good at, especially you. Like when you'd give those pregame speeches, like passion was an understatement. I mean, I remember at Watertown Mayor junior year, you're on your hands and knees showing us how we're supposed to come off the line. I'm like, man, this guy's just as hyped up as we are right now to go on the field. I mean, give him some pads and a helmet right now at this point. So, that's very contagious.
It is. You can't. You lead with your heart. I don't want to sound like I'm preaching, but you kind of lead with your heart. I never, ever, during my coaching career, never pre-thought for 10 seconds. Never pre-thought what I was going to say. It would just come, whether it be before the game, halftime, post-game. It just came out of my mouth for the most part, even at the wrap-up banquet at the end of the year, But I think if you're passionate about something, you don't worry. You just rock and roll with what comes.
Yeah, you're, like you said, speaking from the heart, leading from the heart. The words will come if you're very passionate and you care about what it is you're leading. So that's very important, very important. And I think sometimes by trying to be too structured in a certain thing, whether it's giving a speech or something like that, it can almost diminish what you're trying to say.
Absolutely.
If you're trying to, like if you got it on your hand or something, bullet points or a script, and you're trying to remember it to a T, it's like, that's not going to inspire people as much as if you're just in the moment, kind of telling kids or players, coaches, whatever it happens to be, how things are going to go.
I agree.
So the next question I have here is one my father thought would be a good question to ask, and to be honest, this is probably the one I've been looking forward to the most. Hearing you answer is, could you describe the leadership styles of Pete Herges and Jim Mater? And before we go into that, for people that could be listening to this that don't know, Pete Herges, Jim Mater, probably the two most important coaches, one could say, in Albany history. I mean, Pete Herges really and I think he coined the term Purple Pride. That's still here to this day. Jim Mater was the coach for 2 state championship teams. So you were able to, I don't know if you were able to witness Pete Herges necessarily. I heard you played against him when you were in high school, but you were in the system with Mater. And what was that like, and what leadership lessons and tactics did they teach you?
I just learned volumes. I'll start with Coach Herges. No, I didn't coach with him, but I competed against him. And I'll tell you a quick little story. About a month ago, Jack Evans had Pete Herges, Jim Mater, and I come into his studio to do a photo shoot. I'm not sure what he's going to do with it. And he took this shot of Pete Herges standing. He asked Pete to stand sideways with his hat on, not smiling. And I looked at that picture, Mason, and my hair went up in the back of my head, because it was the exact same stance that I saw across the field when I went against him. It's just exact. And when you went against Albany, they were like a machine. I got to go like the Wizard of Oz. I got to go, when I came here to coach, I got to go behind the curtain. But I was on the other side. It was a machine. They were just relentless. It was just cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And I remember looking over at Coach Herges like, this guy must be something else. Although I never coached from him, and then I got to know him, and he was great leadership when I got to Albany as the athletic director.
Yep.
He was super decisive. Athletics was a big part of it was a calling card for Albany, and it was a good calling card, and it still is today, and it's a positive thing. I got to coach with Jim for 18 years. A lot of the same qualities. Jim was, he's decisive. He knows what he can do. He has a great way of looking at the large lens. And Jim and Pete both, one of the staples of coaching football is you have to get kids in the right spot. Jim would say that again and again and again. And so I learned that from them. And both of them would out-prepare and outwork their opponents every single week. I don't want to offend anybody, but that was the case. And that I adopted from them. I thought, when I was the head coach, I don't know if we'll win or lose. You go out and do the best you can. But no one, absolutely no one, is going to out-prepare. Our boys are going to be ready. They're going to be ready. Sometimes we lost. Sometimes we won. But we were going to be the most prepared team. And I learned that from Pete and Jim. And the other thing I'll say is they were consistent all the way through, and they were brilliant at the basics. That stuck with me. And one more thing I learned from them is if you do the little things right, the big things fall into place. They had such attention to detail. And so if you just look at that, that's a mouthful. That can take you in any sport, and it can spill over to your life. If you follow that, you've got it.
Yeah.
And I got it from those guys.
I know, talking to Coach Schlegel over the years, and just with the interview I was able to have with him, he always said, whether you win or lose as a coach, if you are prepared going in, the outcome can be what it may. As long as you know you did your best to prepare yourself and the team for success, and you did your earnest for that, whatever the result is, you can at least hang your hat on that at the end of the day. And that was one of his biggest quotes throughout my time underneath him as a player was, you do the little things right, and everything falls into place. Because you aren't going to start off by, like for basketball, I've said it before, you're not going to be doing slam dunks and crazy dribble moves before you learn, the basic fundamentals of defense and offense and all of that. And, so little things definitely accumulate over time. And once you get those figured out, it's gravy.
It's a great observation from Coach Lego. Great. He's spot on.
Yeah. And that seems to be consistent both in sports and just in life, too.
It is.
Like you said. Very important. Next one here, what similarities did the 1989 and 1997 state championship teams have in common with each other?
Both of them, when I look back, both of them had a lot of unselfish players. They were both very talent-laden, but very unselfish. You know what both of them had, Mason, was good senior leadership, both captains and non-captains. Both of them had that. They both had a I'll say, a quiet confidence about them, almost a business-like approach. I mean, they had fun and celebrated like that, but I'll call it a quiet confidence. Great leadership from within, from the players themselves. I guess that would define those two, you know, and deep. They were never a one-person team. None of them had one person. We had depth at every position, and sometimes 3 deep.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good sign,
yes,
right there.
Yes.
It's a sign of a healthy program too, if you're able to retain players like that over time.
Yes.
And like you said, if you have good senior leadership, sometimes people might be prone to thinking, this is my year, my time to shine. I don't care what you sophomores are doing here. It's my moment now. But if you're able to, step away from it and look at the big picture, that's a team effort. I mean, the success is evident in the banners in the gym that they got.
Yes. And, there's not, in your previous comment, we never judge teams by like 89, 97 won championships. But there were some awesome teams out there, just tremendous teams that didn't. There were some that were maybe inferior teams that went to state tournament. There is an element of, I don't want to call it luck, but the way that the ebb and flow of the season goes, injuries,
yep,
things like that. The stars kind of aligned with them, and they grabbed that mantle and took it.
And that's another thing. Was there any teams that stick out to you for ones that maybe didn't necessarily win state, but still were just like the epitome of what a good team should look like?
Back in 2001, we had a crackerjack unit, and we went up to the state tournament and got beat by Greenway of Coleraine. I just remember 6 or 7 fumbles, and that was probably state champion team, or just a solid team, but they didn't win it. That's just the way it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Both 96, 98 teams, both had a good chance at that. And 2005, we ran up against a buzzsaw Becker, but that was a very good team. Even a pandemic year, the season that was your sophomore year,
yep,
that's a good. Then the season just got pulled out from under us. So there's things that are in your control in life and things that are out of your control in life, and you just embrace them all.
Yeah, you just got to focus on the things you can control.
Yes.
Like COVID. That's something, you can scream and shout about not being able to play in the state champion or a state tournament, but at the end of the day, it's out of your control. So you just got to focus on what you can control.
Yes, and that's why, we didn't – you want to win every game. But to your earlier comment, Coach Schlegel's, that's you perform the best you can with the troops that you have, and you want a great experience, have the kids, learn life lessons, and you go on from there. And so, I judge it. I want to honestly say I judge it by that.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're really after.
And as great as it is to win state championships and get all the awards and what have you, at the end of the day, your sports, at least the way I looked at it, high school sports are meant to prepare people for life and what life's going to throw at you, because you're going to be, one would hope you're going to be in life a lot longer than you are going to be in high school athletics. But the lessons that you learn in high school athletics should be able to, if it's done correctly, be able to help you throughout your entire life.
There's no greater feeling and I speak for other older retired coaches, maybe even active coaches, when a former player would come back and give you a comment that they appreciated the things that you taught them. And, that is, it's better than any trophy you ever had in your hand or any game you won. Those are, but those things are more meaningful.
That's what it's all about.
It's meaningful. And you see the kids, the leadership of your student athletes. You see the leadership. They emerge. I think of there's a picture ingrained in my mind. We had a tough loss in 2007 in the state semifinal. Yes, against Klinko. And we were at the Old Country Buffet eating, and the season's over, and you wanted to win the title. And I look over and I see our star player, Captain Kurt Schlangen, over in a booth with a sophomore who never hit the field, No, really kind of isolated young man by himself, and he's sitting in the booth talking to him, not for show, just because that's what the leaders do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll always remember that.
That's awesome. That's a great mental picture to have right there.
Yes.
That sums it up to what a good student-athlete leader should be right there at the end of the day. When you became the head football coach, did you find it difficult to lead in your own unique way?
I knew, at Albany, football was tradition-based and successful. And when I got the job, I was just over the moon, but I was nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And back in those days, they had bracelets you'd wear, WWJD, what would Jesus do? And I was thinking, what would Jim do?
Some people think, what's the difference in Albany right there?
That's a good point. But I knew from the onset, though, Mason, my honest answer is everything was in place, and I knew I could never be Jim. I wasn't him, and I wasn't going to pretend to be someone that I'm not. So, yes, we kept the structure the same and everything, but in those moments, then I had to be myself and be authentic. And I look back now, I feel fortunate that I took over the reins of a program that was successful, because you might say, oh, there's pressure, but there's a culture. The kids know. They know. There's expectations, and that's what you inherit, that they want to be successful, and by George, they're going to.
Yeah, that seems to be one thing that Albany has traditionally been good at, is just having that expectation that we should have a winning season every year.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you'll have a few here and there where you're not going to, but the expectation and not the exception should be having a winning season.
Yes, I agree.
And just success in general. And what you do on the field or on the court of play and what you do off the field is very evident in the results that you're going to generate. If you don't commit to it 100%, you're not going to reap the rewards that you're hoping for.
That's well spoken.
Coach Schlegel mentioned how important it is for leaders to adapt to changes over time. How did you manage to achieve this in coaching and in teaching?
Well, the two go hand in hand. Good teachers make good coaches. Good coaches are good teachers. You kind of follow the same format, both from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and then 3 o'clock to 5:30, and even on Friday nights. I think you follow the same thing. You always have to adapt. I think back my third year as the head coach in 2005, we chucked that ball in the air. I think it was Eric Harlander. I think he ended up, maybe now in the last couple of years it got beat, but he was the all-time leading passer.
I think he's still.
And that's, we just had that combo of him and Josh Overman and things like that. But the point of that is we saw that we had the ability to really sling that thing out. And so that was a major upheaval from my point of view. And then as the years went by, if we had that, we try to tap into it. So I think you try to play to your strengths. Mm-hmm. You never, ever leave your core values. I learned that from Jim. He said to me, establish a basic philosophy and don't stray from that. I remember when I asked Jim, just give me one more piece of advice. Give me one last piece of advice for my first year, and I thought it would be discipline or something like that. He said, have a philosophy, don't stray from it, and be organized. And that organized tip was immense. I think you have to plan for everything, and that was a great tip from him. But I think you have to evolve all the time. I think we always had an open door policy, but as the years went by, athletes, I remember we would not used to let them play fall baseball, or we discouraged it. Now, we just embrace that because they're competing, and I think you go through changes and you have to do that. It's not easy, but you do change with the times. I would say you see that in Coach Saban, people like that, Coach Krzyzewski, they've changed, but you never stray from the foundation that you went into the job with.
Yeah, and it's like saying you said with Mater's advice is kind of hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Yes.
You don't want to do just one. You want to. They both go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand, and what I referred to earlier, the preparation. Always, out prepare. We would practice, the thing about Albany is you rehearse everything. And that gets back to that preparation point. We, at every practice, have your number 1 quarterback go with the number 2 center, and have your number 2 center or your number 1 center go with the number 2 quarterback every day.
Mm-hmm.
Every day. And always have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. Mm-hmm. For every position, all 11. We'd go inside the coach's office, whether I was assistant with Jim or head coach with Coach Amdahl and your dad. Always plan A, always plan B, always plan C. That way you're never surprised come game time. And I think we ran across some teams that didn't have that.
Yeah. And it shows on sometimes the biggest stages when you aren't prepared. And that's the last worst fears for coaches is to be unprepared or ill-prepared in the biggest game of the year.
Yes.
Especially come playoff times when one bad day can be the season, basically.
Yes.
Or your career if you're a senior, for that matter.
Yes.
That's when the pressure's on. But like I said earlier, that's just great pressure or great lessons for life to deal with pressure in that situation. I know my dad had said something, him being a teacher, that he always noticed when he'd put time limits on students. Now, this isn't, true for every single person or student that he's had, but he said the athletes seem to be able to deal with the pressure. I don't know if better is the word, but they kind of thrive in that situation more so than the non-athletes. Nothing against the non-athletes, but there's going to be moments in life, no matter what you do, what job it happens to be, whether you own a bait shop or you're a huge CEO or something like that, you're going to have pressured situations, and how you handle those are going to make or break the business or whatever field you happen to be in. So very important for life.
Great observation by your dad, who, by the way, is just a great leader in and of himself. It's that's a whole nother area, but you're fortunate having him as dad, and
very much
just
so.
A humble guy, but a great leader in 1,000 ways.
Big shoes to fill, to say the least.
Yes.
Next one I have here is it's true you coached golf too, correct? Mm-hmm. So what are some key differences in coaching / leading an individual sports team like golf compared to coaching or leading a team sport like football?
I found it to be very similar because I just had my style that I had learned, and I implemented. I followed that same routine in golf. Golf can be a very much team-oriented thing because we had great players. I was handed Adam Dooley my first year. He won the state individual title. But we always had the team concept every single day, because what was going to put you over the top were not your 1 and 2 players, but it was going to be the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players. Who's in the 7th spot, who's in the 6th spot. And I found it to be a very much team approach. Just a quick shout out. There's when you coach golf, you're in a van a lot, and there's a co-pilot seat up front, and usually it's reserved for your team captain, your senior, and in my situation, I was so fortunate. It was Brad Anvig, and Brad was only a junior, but he would sit in that co-pilot seat as we're driving to Long Prairie or Monticello, and he would go through every hole in the card and how they should play it. And it was very much a team concept in my memory of coaching the golf. Yes, sometimes at the end of the year you had an individual, but they were all very aware of a team concept. If we had a great victory, a conference victory, we would celebrate by the van, maybe go to a restaurant and eat. So we kept that team concept even in the sport of golf.
And that had been a very special bond too, because though it is a team, it's a lot smaller team to football, where you'd have over 50 guys sometimes in just a program. Where in golf, I don't know if there's a max number, but sometimes it seems like you just have less than 10 for some teams.
You do, but in no way would I ever demean golf. It is a tremendous. There's pressure in football and other sports, but in golf, there's a lot of pressure. Yeah. You have fans watching, you have parents watching, you have maybe galleries of a couple hundred people when you get to the sections and stuff, and the kids learn a lot about themselves, and they taught me a lot too. And
how important consistency is.
Consistency.
In golf.
It's the game of golf is never about who hits the great shots. It's always about who hits the least amount of errant shots.
Yeah.
Those are the champions right there.
Yep.
All the way up to Scotty Scheffler.
Exactly. And unfortunately, I've learned that the hard way this year at the golf course. Thankfully, I'm not playing for no state titles, so that's good. But yeah, golf seems like that's also a good sport on managing emotions too. I feel like golf, you got to be even keeled the whole time. You never want to get too elated, or you never want to get too down. You just got to stay in that neutral state.
Same principles apply as in football. Preparation. Outwork them, know every hole, know when you're not going to hit your driver, work everything, go and work shots out of the sand trap, shoot, putt. It's a lot of the same principles that you find when you coach any other sport, whether it's Coach Schlegel in basketball or, you fall to those basic premises, and it was very true in golf too.
Yeah, that's great. And the best thing about golf is, compared to football, is you can play that the rest of your life.
You can. Yep.
Football, I mean, you can try, but I don't know. That would be a hard life to live if you're playing that when you're older.
It is. But, that you think of an analogy in golf, you walk up to your ball, and it's laying maybe in a divot or clump of clover.
Yep.
You got to play it as it lies.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to take it and shimmy it over 4 feet, which we see people do all the time, but it's a good metaphor for play it as it lies.
Yep.
And take it out of there. That's the way it goes.
Play it as it lies. That's good. Let's see here. You already kind of touched on this a little bit, on how your coaching philosophy was, or your leadership philosophy is similar in the classroom as it was, in football or in golf. Was that something that you realized right away when you first started teaching and coaching, or is that something you kind of had to, practice or test throughout the first few years? Or is it something you just, when you did it, you knew? I
kind of went into it with that mentality just from being a football player at the collegiate level. And when I got my first teaching job, everything was kind of team orientated. I taught a 5th and 6th grade combination, and we would have goals up on the board that every day that they had a really solid day, I would flip over a letter, for some basic prize, maybe a movie or something at the end of the month. And so you had the whole class involved. And if somebody broke that decorum, that wouldn't get turned over. So right away the class knew that we're all pulling together, or we're all, the chain is linked together. Kind of carried that into the teaching mode too. Always, in coaching, you always want to treat all your players with respect, and same thing in the classroom. You have to treat them with respect.
Yeah. Basic things right there,
yes.
But very important.
So that's what I went into my teaching career with.
Okay.
And you've seen that modeled by both your parents.
Yeah, and it seems like it'd be almost inefficient to try to, alter that as, when 3 o'clock comes. You don't want to just change your personality or your core philosophies. And it's not some people maybe find success doing that, but it seems like the successful coach is just, like you said, core philosophy. You stick to that, and you do that.
Earlier we talked about what you learn things not to do, and I'm sure you and I had educators who we didn't like their styles. I had one that was just complete, 100% authoritative, taught out of fear, and I thought I never really dug that at all. And not going to carry that into that. And you kind of learn things that you don't want to do as well along the way.
For sure. How did you deal with difficult players that challenged your coaching or your leadership? Whether that could be either in the classroom or in sports too. Was there certain methods that you used or you found more effective, and did this change over time?
Really, what I tried to do was find out the root cause. Usually when whether it be in the classroom or in the team, there was kind of a root cause. I would in my coaching, I would go into the property room. That was my private, if I had to have a private conversation, it was in the property room with the split doors. Yep. I would go in there and we'd have conversations that were never going to be repeated. It was just between the athlete and I, and we'd try to get down to the core of it. hopefully with our open door policy, you could be proactive enough where you never had to get to that point. But a lot of those athletes were great players, and they just maybe had something else going on, and it was manifesting themselves at the thing. It might have been pressure from a dad or something going on in their family, and we just saw the result of it. But we tried to get to the root of it there, one-on-one. And I think in the classroom, it was the same way. Keep that kiddo in during recess and just try to probe and find out what's going on here. What's going on? You're not always successful, but I think by and large that was the approach I took, and by and large it proved to work pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And I think challenging students or players will at least respect the fact that you're making an earnest effort to find a solution to the problem at hand.
Yes.
And whether they're going to be whether they realize that in the moment or 20 years later, you just hope that you did your best in that situation to try to alleviate the problem.
Well, that's well put. I think athletes and students can sniff out sincerity in a microsecond, whether it's in a teacher, whether it's in a coach. They know if you're sincere or not. They just know it. And I think if you go the extra mile, it helps alleviate a difficult situation.
Mm-hmm. And that's, again, like you said, that's kind of what it's all about. Whether you don't want it, championships are great, but when you have someone come up to you 25 years later and you're saying that talk really set me on the right path, like your coach did by telling you in 9th grade you were running with the wrong crowd. Those are a lot more important, and you'll get a lot more good out of it in the long run by experiencing that. During your coaching career, what characteristics seem to separate the great teams from the good teams? I know we kind of talked about that a little bit with the state championship teams, but was there any consistent characteristics, whether it be good senior leadership or people just buying into the team effort, that they might be good teams, but some that just went that extra mile? What was that? What separated them in that extra mile? Yeah,
the leadership thing for sure. Those teams had a lot invested into this ultimate thing. The preparation started way beforehand. Great strength training, great 3-sport athletes. There's a lot that goes into that, and they're very focused. You could just tell it with those teams. They're just so focused, and they're it's a goal that they wanted everybody on board with the same page. You had good leadership, and I guess you just kind of felt that, with those teams. Some of them got to the ultimate goal. Some of them didn't. And I will add this, Mason. Those teams, they loved the game. Mm-hmm. They loved the game of football. Some, they were great athletes. It was okay. We did great, but those teams, they loved football.
And that's a big part of it.
Yes.
What you said, the defensive coordinator who is just passionate.
Yeah.
When the players are passionate and the coaches are passionate, success usually is comes out of that. And that's a big thing.
Yes, we had a passionate defensive coordinator in our college time too, and the players loved him.
Would you say strength training when you first started coaching compared to when you retired had changed significantly? Even when you were a player yourself?
My answer will surprise you. When I got to Albany, I was in shock. 7th hour was weightlifting. That all the athletes in the school, if you weren't in band, if I remember right, band or choir, they lifted weights during the school day, and they were jacked, guys and girls. I mean, there was a big emphasis on strength training way before many of the schools had it. It's always been present at Albany, and that was long before I came. That was under the Jim Mater and I believe Pete Hergis era. So I think Albany's had to edge up on that area, and it's kind of ebbed and flowed. But I think it has. Jim taught me there's a fine line between winning and losing, and that is part of that fine line. That I think just that strength training, and now it's off the charts with Coach Swensfire, and that's and it's not just males, it's females, and it's just you have so much vested into it now, and it's the difference. It's the difference maker in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you can experience that and see that clearly sometimes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's almost a side effect. It might not even be the actual speed and strength, but you take all the athletes and they're taking time out of their day. You know, you walk into the Albany weight room on a Monday morning at 6 o'clock and there's 75 people in there, 50% girls, 50% boys. You know what? You're going to have a good sports season. I guarantee it.
Yeah. Yeah. That says a lot, not just directly from whether you're breaking records on, a bench press or something. When you got whether it's 7th through, to 12th grade, you got them in there grinding at 6:30 in the morning, that says a lot. More than just your desire to get stronger. Your desire to get better as a person.
Yes. You go all the way back to when I first got there, Coach Jewell, they just embraced the strength training, and it's just another, I guess I'll just call it dedication to the task at hand.
Mm-hmm.
And Albany's always had that.
Yeah, and it seems, from what I've experienced, if you have senior leaders that emphasize or are demonstrating, I don't got to be the rah-rah giving speeches, but if you're just in there working hard and the younger players see that they're like, this is the expectation that we have, and it's a high expectation in that weight room with Coach Schwensfire, and I'm sure it has been, like you said, since they were doing it in 7th hour. I mean, that's going to translate over to so many other things in life and in sports.
I'll just a quick story on that. I remember Mr. Conrad was running an early morning, pretty aggressive Phi-Ed class. They got a credit for it. It was like from 6 till 7:10 every morning, and he came up to me. We had a huge game coming up against Sauk Center. I believe we were both 6-0 at the time, and he said, "Coach, we're supposed to run the mile today. This is Friday." And he said, just give me the word. Just give me the word, and I said, they're students first before they're ever athletes. I said, run the mile. We'll take on Sauk with those guys. Don't change what you're doing. And I don't know what the players thought about it, but Paul had them run the mile. Played Sauk Center that night and fortunate enough to win. But it's that kind of the way you approach it, I think, is a good positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for myself, just the lessons that you learn in the weight room are just as important in the lessons you learn in sports too. I mean, whether just all that we've talked about before, it just so many. They're all the opportunities to learn and improve yourself are there. It's just a matter of if you go out and take advantage of them.
Yeah, we used to hear comments. I guess this would be more in the Coach Schlegel's and Coach Boyum's range, but you hear comments from parents. Well, we don't want you lifting during the year. It's going to throw your shot off and stuff. And that just got blown out of the water with people like Paige Meyer and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
They've been there all the time. And now you look at the premier athletes. I don't care what sport. Watch Full Swing Golf on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of them strength trains. Probably a Tiger Woods thing. Basketball, they train year-round. Football, they train year-round. It's blown that methodology out of the water, or that mindset.
I remember when I was in middle school or younger, high schooler, and seeing the girls' basketball team go out to Zimmerman on a Tuesday night and win by 40 points or something, and then the next morning you go to hit 6:30 a.m. They probably didn't get back till midnight, and Paige Meyer's like, she's just waiting to get in there. I'm like, that's a leader right there.
For sure.
That's what it's all about.
For sure. That's right.
That speaks volumes to so many things.
Yes.
Well, shifting here back to coaching, what was the lowest moment of your coaching career, and what would you say is the highest moment? What lessons did you learn from both?
The lowest moment, I can tell you, there was 19 of them. I guess there was 18. The lowest moment, as I look back at it, was when the season ended in a loss. You put so much into it, and it's just I can't find adjectives to. You just have an empty feeling. You laid it all out on the line, and you're so proud of the kids, so proud of them. But I have to say, I always had a soft spot or an affinity for the seniors, because I went through that, and it's the last time for 90% of them, the last time they'll put on these shoulder pads and that helmet and the jersey and the spikes. And I would go. I never knew what Jim did, but I would ask everyone to leave, and I would stay in there with the seniors for about 5 minutes. And I can relive that. It's just almost, I would sob. You were at your low point, but you told them how much you cared for them. Thank them for 6 years of doing our style of football, which is a unique style of football. The practices at Albany are unique. And that was a low point, and I had to go through that. I want to say 18 times, because the pandemic here, we weren't allowed to meet. That was the oddest thing.
That was weird.
Those are and they're all tied. Those are the low points.
Yeah.
Those were so tough. Your heart just broke. Not for the whole team, truly, but for those seniors. I never got to have that moment with you. Because I chose to go out. But those were the low ones. The high ones, this will sound strange, but I had 151 high notes. And I don't say that. I say that because that's how many times, Mason, we got to sing the school song in a victory celebration. And there's nothing like it. Nothing. We would sing that short Albany school song, which only takes 20 seconds to sing. But every single time when we sang, I would look into the eyes. Of our players. And generally, not the star players. I'd go in the middle of that circle and look, and you just saw the rapture of 60 young men coming together, and what you worked hard all week, because we worked our players so hard Monday through Thursday. Thursday practice was 2 hours and 15 minutes. Normal schools don't do that. But getting back to that, you'd look into their eyes and you'd see the rapture that they accomplished something that they felt so good about, and it's singed in their, it's singed in their brain. It's always going to be there. And that to me was, it was like, I loved it. And I did the same thing every time, every home, away, didn't matter. You look into their eyes. And that's my answer.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Right there. You kind of alluded to this too with that feeling of putting on the shoulder pads, and you're sitting in the locker room and you're tightening up the screws in your helmet. The smell of the grass on Friday nights. Why do you think that feeling of camaraderie is so powerful in high school football?
I think that high school football, and I guess other sports as well, but in high school football, it's, you grow up as kids and you're playing a game. Football is a game. It's a game played on grass, and almost brings out the kid in you. And you got your cleats with the mud, and and it's what sport does. It puts you in a position. Very few times in life are you put in the position to be asked to give everything that you have. Very few times. Some of those players that maybe since then they've never had that again. But for those intense moments, it can't be replicated, and that's what sport gives you. Like, we got to go out and we got to do this, and you push yourself further than what you thought you could do. What other platform is there? It's not going to be their job that they go to and run out of the office at 4:30, go to happy hour. It's not going to be that. This was, you're pushed to the brink. Can I do this? And when you accomplish that, I don't think you ever forget it. You just never forget it.
Yeah.
It's a feeling that, you go back to class reunions. I've been back to several. It doesn't take long, and the conversation goes to this game, that game, this game, that tackle, that fumble, that interception. And I always think it goes back to they'll remember that whoever the line is, the sum was maybe was greater than the sum of all the parts. They were part of that, and they were pushed to the brink, and they liked it.
Yeah.
And it's there forever.
That's great. I know for myself personally, I remember sitting at the nice turf field at St. John's and watching Coach Mater give a speech. This is when he wasn't an assistant coach at the time. I was maybe like 6th or 7th grade. And he's giving the speech, and everyone's just like, oh, my gosh, it's Jim Mater giving a speech to us young kids. And I just remember him using the word camaraderie. Football is so much about it is camaraderie. And that feeling of – I always kind of equated it to this is nowhere near the extremes, but it almost is like what I would think would be the feeling of going to war would be like, with your buddies. You're going out there to win, but really when you're out there on the line, you're trying your best not to screw up for the guy to your left and right of you, and you got the task at hand and you're trying to accomplish it. Obviously, it's nowhere near the level of violence that you're experiencing, but you're going out there, you're a little nervous, you're going to get hit, you're going to be bruised, you'll be sore the next day, and it's a little nerve-wracking, but once you get that first touch of contact, all those feelings of worry go away and you're just locked into that moment.
A great analogy, Mason. There's so many. Even the word blitz. You have a linebacker blitz is a military word. It draws a lot of it from the military, and your dependence upon the person next to you. The discipline. I mean, it's sheer discipline. It's long count. You are not going to jump offside. If you do, at least in my time, we took you out of the game. There is a lot of that, and I will say. One of the greatest compliments I received was in you guys were playing in a downpour, and they had a night where they...
Oh, yep. Little Falls is the...
Yes. And one of my former players went on in the military, and it just touched my heart. He said a lot of the things that you taught us, he uses for his men. And when you hear something like that, it just melts you. It's chuck all the trophies and put them in a cardboard box. Who cares? Whatever. Flex, but that means a lot. But there are a lot of similarities between the military and that. And if you look at it, what group is tighter than the military group? Which, they should be. My dad was in World War II, and I saw the pride in his face. My grandfather was in World War I, and when he got to march in the parade every year, he'd put that uniform on, and I remember he was just at the top of the world, and I thought, he fought in World War I. Now, this is just football, but I think it draws on that.
Yeah.
And that's really cool.
And especially when you have such a rich history like United States military does, or Albany football does, there's just something about that color of purple or that red, white, and blue that just gets you going, gets you hyped up, because the expectations and what Purple Pride, or like the Marines, the few, the proud, the Marines, that what those sayings represent, and the high points in those historic, histories of those programs. It's just it's very special, and it's very cool to be a part of something like that too. Because, like you said, once people are done with football or high school or sports, they might never experience something like that again.
No, and you hope that they take. They take a lot of the things that you have tried to impart on them and use it in their lives. And but I will say, when a good leader, I look back, Mason, on not only the 18 years as assistant at Albany, but 19 years ahead, you have to check your ego at the door. I learned so much more from my players than they ever learned from me. It's 50-1. And I think that is a trait of a good leader. I don't care if it's military. I don't care if it's a Fortune 500 company or a elementary softball. It doesn't matter. You have to learn from your players and get to know each one of them and establish that rapport.
Yeah, absolutely. Just little things.
Yes.
Why has Albany football been such a successful program over the years? I mean, I forget the number, but since Mater took over, or not Mater, Hergis took over in the, was it mid-50s, had it been?
Yeah.
I think there's only been maybe 6 losing seasons since then. Do you know why do you think that's the case, that there's been such a precedent for success?
I think, we talked about it earlier. There's been so much consistency. Now with Coach Ellingson, there's been 4 head coaches. I mean, there was 3 that spanned 66 years, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're only at 4 coaches. And so that's not an easy thing, but it is a great thing because the consistency is there, the expectations are there. You remember doing the Ironman challenge. That thing that's ancient, but it's kind of endured time. And I think the consistency is a big one. I alluded to it a couple minutes ago. I feel that the way the Albany Huskies practice is incredible. It's incredible. There was one year, I won't say what school he's from, but they lost in the playoffs. My phone rang, and we were in the playoffs, maybe in the second or third round. He wanted to come over and just watch practice, and he no sooner asked than the no just jumped out of my mouth. I couldn't believe it. I said, nope. Because the way we practice is, it's unique.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I don't even want to talk about it on air because I think that's the key to it. And I think that comes from Pete, kind of a St. John's atmosphere, and then Jim and myself and all Michael's carried that through, and you were a part of that. If you go on and become a coach somewhere, you'll see other programs practice remarkably different. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a key to Albany, and it just leads to what you and I talked about, where you are more prepared for every single scenario. And I think they want to be part of the tradition of success. The players do. The groundwork is laid, and they want to be part of that, and I think that motivates them.
Yeah, and it seems when you get the early on successes, that's expectation and that desire to be part of that just snowballs over time.
Yes.
And I've just seen that in the basketball program at Albany with, the repeated successes Coach Schlegel has been fortunate to have in his career at Albany, and just how that is spread throughout the entire program. I mean, I think there's been less than 10 losses between all levels of the 7th through 12th grade just last year, and that's 5 levels of basketball. And it's just it snowballs, I think.
Yes, and it emanates out from the core values, the philosophy that they have, and I think that it's across the board. You see that in a lot of the sports at Albany, and you see the results.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of my final questions I have here, I got 2 more for you. In your opinion, what are the most important traits or values a leader should possess?
Well, I'd mentioned it a little bit ago. I think a leader learns from their players or their troops, their constituents, whatever, their clients, whatever you want to call them. I think they're consistent in their methodology. They have a philosophy, a core that they're not going to stray from. Outwork or out. I guess just. I think a good leader is passionate and sincere.
Mm-hmm.
Be it coaching, be it in front of a classroom, they should be passionate about it and they should be sincere. It's 365 days a year when it comes down to it. You don't just put in your time, and I think all players and students have a good grasp of who's leading them. They're just so intuitive. Kids are intuitive, and they know a fraud from somebody that's sincere. Mm-hmm. And I think a good leader just loves what they do, and that just transcends onto them. And we all make mistakes. We're imperfect beings. Leaders make mistakes all the time. And I guess it's part of growing, because your players are going to do it. Leaders are going to do it too. I mean, how many times we call the wrong play, Mason, or we call the wrong, or we do that, but you learn from it, and it's a good metaphor for life.
Yep.
they just have the ability to get the best out of everyone and treat everyone. I don't care if it's the youngest sophomore that doesn't have a lot of athletic ability or something like that, but you treat them the same as you do your 1,800-yard rusher senior. You better treat them the same, because otherwise everyone will know.
Yeah.
And you can get those. You can foster leadership from the kids, and I think I'll swing back to what we said at the beginning. I think a good leader is one that uses 1,000 different little things sometimes it's the right word at the right time. Sometimes it's the right reprimand at the right time. Sometimes just letting that person go. It's just 1,000 little things.
Mm-hmm.
There's no real manual for it, but you do the best you can and you lead with your heart.
Yep.
And I think the results are usually good.
Yep. Those little things will accumulate over time.
They'll accumulate over time.
That's a big thing. It's a nice semi we got in the background there. It's a small town, Minnesota, right there. That's the loudest one I've ever heard. But I think we got the bulk of it out before that happened,
yes,
so that's
you did.
good. My final question I have for you is an Albany question, to say the least. How would you define Purple Pride?
That's a doozy. I'm going to say Purple Pride it's like a culture. Purple Pride is just a culture. It emanates all the way across sports, across the classroom. It's just a culture of working towards the same goal, and everyone's a part of it. It's started with great athletic directors, coaches like Pete Hergis, Jim Mader, and many other sports. I'm just referring to football because that's been the dominant sport that you and I have discussed.
Yep.
But also as educators. We've had great educators, and they just keep that culture, because it's not easy to do, and it can slip in a hurry. It's that line that I got from Jim, winning and losing. It can go, a fine line, and that culture has stayed strong at Albany. And the old saying is, it takes a village. It takes a village, and everybody contributes to that. I don't care if it's a 7th grade girls golf coach, all the way up to your head football coach. They all contribute to that. Or maybe it's a kindergarten teacher who has a great impact on a student compared to your high school principal or superintendent. All of them. That's the 1,000 thing. All of them are a part of this. You can go to any school and they say, hey, we have Tiger Pride, we got Trojan Pride, we got Spartan Pride, and they do. I can only speak to Purple Pride because it's a culture that is amazing. Remember, I saw it from the outside in. I saw it from somebody that went against it, and now I got to go behind the curtain, and I see it across the board. And it's some of the things you and I have discussed, and some of it, I guess, we may never know.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone keeps working towards that end, and that in itself is a success. It's like, I allude to what Coach Schlegel said. The final end doesn't result, but that Purple Pride, that commitment, and that sense of purpose to accomplish something, it's probably the journey more than the destination.
Yeah. It's not something you can describe with one word, but you know it when you see it.
You do.
That's kind of how I've always interpreted it over time, is you know it when you see it.
That's a great way to put it. And everybody's just a tiny little part of it, but I'd say we're all equal. Mm-hmm. And that's I guess it starts with leadership, but that leadership is in many different forms, which I think it can be. Mm-hmm. And it creates just a great environment. And Albany it's a special place, and I think they're on the right trajectory to keep that going,
to say the least. Yes, they are. Well, that's all I had for you. Thank you for giving me the time. I sincerely appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it was a lot of fun, Mason, and I love the fact that you're going down this path. You'll be successful in it too, because just your desire to want and find out about things like that, it's what we just talked about. It's that journey, and great young man, and I'm glad to be a part of this. Feel honored that you considered talking to me.
Well, thank you for doing it. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Youthful Perspectives. I hope this conversation provided ideas and advice you can use in your everyday life. Though there are plenty of helpful takeaways throughout our conversation, the ones I found most beneficial include the understanding that there will be those who will challenge one's authority and leadership. When this occurs, it is vital that the leader uncovers the root causes for this conduct and exhibits both empathy and understanding in finding a lasting solution. The importance in discovering your core values as a person and a leader, and learning how these values can be effectively implemented to changes over time. Lastly, the belief that effective leaders exhibit passion in what they lead by leading with their heart and allowing their passion to guide them. This final point summarizes the essence that led to Coach Kleinschmidt's success and lasting impact as a leader. As he said, quote, "Athletes and students can sniff out sincerity in a microsecond," end quote. This is not only true in high school, but in life. The most effective leaders are the ones who genuinely care about what it is they are leading, and when this is recognized by the ones that are being led, greatness awaits. This is Mason Beerbaum, signing off.